Welcome to HTML5, the Essential Training Series. I'm Mike King, your instructor for this tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to talk about coding elements in HTML. Not going to have a lot of slides here. We're going to go right into our development environment. So let's go into the development environment and let me demonstrate how we code elements in HTML. Alright, so following our normal procedure, let's go ahead and drop out of our presentation. Let's go in and confirm that our development environment is up. First thing I want to do is confirm that I've got my Apache web server up and running, and you can see we've got the Apache web servers up and running, both my Apache and my PHP are functioning as they're supposed to. Let me go ahead and minimize that. Let's go ahead and bring up our browser, which is connected to our HTML root site of our coding elements. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my text editor. I'm going to use Sublime Text 2 as I always do, or as I do most of the time in my tutorials. I'm also going to show you the root structure of the coding elements directory that's part of the root of our website. You'll notice I've got an images folder and there's nothing else in the root directory, and you can actually see that right here in the browser itself. We have an images folder. I've got a couple images in that folder. These are actually placeholders, and you're going to learn how I use placeholders throughout my website developments as we go through these tutorials. I actually use a lot of placeholders as I'm designing my website pages, so that I know that I want a graphic there, and I usually set up the placeholder to the size the graphic's going to be. But a lot of times I won't have the graphics till just before I actually publish the pages. So I'll put placeholders in place so I can see how it's going to lay out as I'm designing the pages themselves. Alright, so now that we've got all that set up, let's go ahead and look at coding elements in HTML. So the first thing we're going to do, let's go ahead and bring up our basic HTML template, which we're going to be working with throughout this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and copy that from my exercise folder, and I'm going to paste that into my text document. I'm going to go ahead and save that template. This is our basic HTML5 template. I'm going to save it in the root of that web root where I'm coding elements, and I want to name this basic template.html. Go ahead and save that in that root folder. This would be a great time for you to pause if you need to go ahead and type this in to your text editor. I also want to confirm that I got my word wrap on, which I do. That's good, so that we don't have anything going off the screen that you can't see. Alright, as you're already aware, most HTML elements start with an opening tag and end with a closing tag. And you can actually see that if you look at our H1 elements right here in the window. We've got an opening H1 tag and we have a closing H1 tag. And the difference is the closing tag is very similar to the opening tag, other than the closing tag is a slash preceding the element name. So this H1 or heading 1 closing tag has a slash preceding that element name. That differentiates the opening tag from the closing tag. And what we're telling HTML is I'm beginning a heading 1 element, and when it comes to that closing tag, it's ending a heading 1 element. Now let's go ahead and we save this file. Let's go ahead and refresh our browser window so we can bring this up. And the heading 1 element is a rather large element in HTML. Keep in mind that we have taken out the CSS reset that we had in previous tutorials. I want you guys to see all this stuff as it appears in the browsers. I didn't want to muck things up with a whole lot of CSS resets or any other formatting. That's why we don't have our CSS files in this particular tutorial. Thus, when we look at the heading 1 tag in our sample file, it has an opening level 1 heading tag, a closing level 1 heading tag, and that tells us that we've got a level 1 heading. You'll also notice that we've got an opening and closing H2 or heading 2 tag in our section element. So I've got an opening section and a closing section. Again, the / tells us that we're closing that particular section of the browser window. Inside there I've got nested a heading 2 and a paragraph tag. And again, the heading 2 has a closing tag and the paragraph tag has a closing tag. And you'll notice how in this particular text editor, when I click on an opening tag, it highlights or underlines, because I can actually have it highlight or underline depending upon your text editor. Normally it will tell you where the corresponding closing tag is. So you notice that on section I've got it underlined and then underlined where it closes. Same thing with headings. Same thing with the paragraph. You notice the small underline. Same thing with my body tags. So it tells me where those closing tags are in reference to the opening tag. There are elements in HTML that have no content or closing tags. So we notice that we have closing tags in some of our elements, but there's also elements in HTML that have no closing tag. These tags are referred to as empty tags. A good example of an empty tag is the break tag. And a BR is a break tag. Let me show you how a break tag works. I'm going to go into my paragraph, and I'm actually going to put a break tag in the paragraph. And what a break tag does, it actually gives me a line feed. It's kind of like a carriage return on a typewriter. So if I save this file, I'm going to go ahead and save this as basic template _1. But if I save this file, what you should notice in my browser window, first we've got to go back and refresh our browser and load the right file. You'll notice that now my paragraph tag takes up 2 lines. Whereas before, this was one long paragraph with 2 sentences. Now each sentence takes up an individual line because I forced a line break with that break tag. That break tag is called an empty tag because it has no corresponding closing tag. There's quite a few tags in HTML that don't have corresponding closing tags. The tag is used to start a new line in the document. We use it quite a bit as we're developing our pages. And it's called an empty tag because it doesn't have its corresponding closing tag. There's another tag that we use quite a bit as we design documents in HTML, and that's the image tag, and it's also considered an empty tag because it too has no closing tag that goes with it. The image tag is used to identify an image and how it will appear in the browser window, and that's one of the reasons why I have this image folder inside this tutorial. We're actually going to be demonstrating this. And what I'm going to do is right here at the top of my section, I'm going to go ahead and put in an image tag. And again, I'm keeping this very simple for a demonstration because there's actually some other things that would go inside this image tag if we are going to be completely compliant, which we are going to be as we design our website. But for my demonstration, I'm leaving out some of the other attributes, which we're going to see in a future tutorial because there's other things that we can put inside this image tag. But for right now, I just want to load an image. And you'll notice once again, we have no corresponding closing tag with this image tag. It's all one tag, and what I've included here is the source. And what the source tells the image tag is where is the file you want to load. If you remember correctly, I've got a directory called images. Inside that directory, I've got 25 by 25, 125 by 125 GIF file. That's what we're going to load for the demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and save that template. Let's refresh our browser window. And you'll notice now, oops, you know what I forgot? Because it's _ph for placeholder. Save the file and refresh the browser window. Because that 125 by 125 is a placeholder graphic, and that's why I always put a ph at the end so I know that it's a placeholder I've got inside the document. But anyway, you'll see that we don't have a closing tag on the image tag also. It too is considered an empty tag. Alright, so while we're on the topic, let's look at some nested elements in HTML while we're talking about these coding elements. Nested elements are quite common in HTML, but they need to be entered correctly in order for them to work correctly inside your browser windows. Tags for one element should never overlap the tags for another element. So let me show you a slide real quick on what I'm talking about, and then we'll come back into our development area and demonstrate this. Alright, so I'm back in the presentation. Now let's talk about nested elements. So when I'm nesting elements in HTML, let's say, for example, I'm starting with a paragraph tag, and I want to nest an element inside of that paragraph tag. So there's a portion of the sentences, or there's a last sentence or something, that I want to make bold. So what I do is I add a bold tag to that particular content of that tag to make it bold. But you'll notice what I want you to notice here is that my bold tag starts inside, or nested, inside my paragraph tags, but the closing bold tag falls outside the paragraph tags. That is an incorrect nesting. That would not work correctly inside of our browser window. What we want to do is when we're nesting elements in HTML, we want to have our opening closing paragraph tag, and then inside those tags, I've nested a bold tag. I've got my opening and closing B tag, or bold for emphasis. That's a correct nesting. So let me go demonstrate that inside of our development environment. Alright, so we're back inside of our development environment, and I want to demonstrate what we were just talking about. If I were to take a bold tag, let's say I want to make this last word, them, bold, and I were to start that bold tag inside my P tag and then close it outside the P tag, that's incorrect nesting. It's going to work, or it's going to appear to work, I should say, but it's incorrect nesting in the way in which we're supposed to nest HTML tags. Notice it is bold, but it's going to be inconsistent. There's going to be things it can do inside the browser that are unexpected, unanticipated, that could mess up the way that our browser displays our text. So what we want to do is when we're nesting HTML elements, we want to make certain that we're nesting them correctly. So if I wanted to make, for instance, closing tags bold, I'd want to start the bold tag inside my paragraph tag. And notice we're inside the P tags. There's my opening tag. There's my closing tag. And I want to close that B tag inside those P tags. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this browser window. So now I've got the bold inside my actual P tags. It's properly nested. Properly nesting tags is very important in HTML. There's a lot of things that we can do with inline elements. There are span tags. Span tags can really goof you up if they're not nested properly. We have italics, we have bold. There's a lot of inline elements, and if you remember back from our inline elements tutorial, a lot of inline elements we can use inside these block elements. And P tag is a block element. Heading tag is a block element. So we want to make certain that as we're using them, we're properly nesting them in the HTML syntax. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial on coding elements in HTML, and if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, just contact me at mike@ontargethtml5.com. I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.